Welcome to the Monos Pod, episode 9 with Tino and Matt. What's up, Matt?
How's it going? Good to see
Good,
you.
man. Monday
Just
morning.
one more week of football and then into God's sport.
That's right. That's right. Today we're doing the our top 10 third base prospect or dynasty prospect rankings and discussion. This one's a fun one. We're really getting into the meat of the prospects now. Anything you want to start with? You wearing the ASU hat for Bonds or what?
For spring training. Coming
That's right.
spring training, gotta celebrate. I had a sister-in-law that was at ASU, and then our buddy Steve in the league is his wife is a professor there, and he's a graduate from there. So
Awesome. So third base, we both have the same at number 1, I assume.
yep, Gunnar.
That's right. Gunnar Henderson, 21 years old, 6'2", 210. He was drafted in the second round, number 42. Number 42 by Baltimore in 2019. Signed over slot, $2.3 million. Alabama high school guy. Number one third baseman, a lot of people's number one prospect. Did play a little bit in the major leagues last year. What is it about Gunnar Henderson for you that, one, is going to move him from shortstop to third base, because initially he was a shortstop prospect, and two, why is he so good?
Well, I think he'll be both initially. He'll be eligible at both. Baltimore really hasn't said one way or the other. But he may be a placeholder a little bit over there until holiday comes up, which may be sooner than we think. But yeah, so he's an interesting player. I was thinking about this last night. There's a lot of players on our lists. We're in a keeper hybrid that were picked up mid-season, weren't even drafted, right? And he's one of these examples of a player. And I think even in the dynasty leagues we joined, I don't think he was that big of a deal. You could have gotten him pretty cheap at the start of the year. He really wasn't on the top 100 list at the start of last year, was he?
Or at the bottom, very bottom of some of them.
Yeah, so it's the type of player that you could identify and grab, and that's the value of prospects, is the value, right? If you could identify him, you could get them quite cheap. So he's balanced across the board, hits the crap out of the ball. I think Baseball America released the EVs, 92 EV average, which is solid, with the speed as well. 60 speed at third base can give you the steals. He'll get on base. On base percentage will be high. He had 12% walk rate, 531 slug last year. His transition to the majors, there was no huge concerns there. There is some swing and miss in his game, but he's a young guy. And I think he could adjust there. I'm not sure as far as, I still have questions about his ceiling. Maybe you could comment on that. You hear people say 30 to 35 home runs, but I see him more of a 20-20 type, a mid-20 home runs, 20 steal type. I don't see that ceiling with his power.
I think his base is, or his floor is 20-20 as a young guy, and probably more like 20 to 25 home runs and 15 steals as he gets older. There was some concern about really high ground ball rate in both AAA and the majors last year, and he had a 2-degree launch angle in 132 plate appearances in the majors last year. But prior to that, they were about 40%. And so I do think he has that 40-40 mix that I like to talk about. The thing about him is that he's a better athlete than a lot of the other guys on this list. And I think that's part of where that power is going to come from, or is coming from now, is he's an athlete. When you watch him, watching film of him was really fun. You could see why, you could see him as a football player, right? You could see him as more as a football player and a basketball player, but you saw the athleticism. And that, to me, is part of what leads you to becoming an elite hitter, an elite power hitter. So I do think there's 30. I actually have his power ceiling at 35. I could see, 35. Like if you were to really dream, I could see a 35 homer, 25 steal year from him. I think that's like his 100th percentile, right? Potential. I don't think that's going to happen, but 30-20, 30-30 is not outside of the realm of possibilities at all. He had really, I liked his swing a lot. He had a really he had quiet hands. He operated with a wide base. Had a really good idea of what he was doing. I love the fact that he can hit opposite field for power. I know that doesn't serve him well necessarily in Baltimore, but I think it's indicative of him being a very good hitter. He did change his approach in 22. He swung a lot less than he did in previous years, and he made more contact than he previously had. I think there was a lot of growth in his pitch selection. His floor is 2020, right? Even if he's a 50 or 55 hit, he still has that explosive power. I have him as 60 hit, 65 power, 60 speed, and 60 discipline. That's an elite third baseman to me. I also would say that since this is a dynasty rank, the fact that we can pretty much count on 15 steals and up at third base gives him a huge boost over so many of the other prospects we're going to talk about. So if you have a developing hit tool, the ability to get on base with walks, 60 to 65 power, and a speed baseline, you're kind of dreaming up the perfect hitter in some ways. One concern that I did have was that, in a really, obviously it's a tiny sample set of 26 plate appearances. Against lefties, he hit 130, 231, 448 last year in the majors. I don't think he'll have tremendous platoon splits, but there is a slight risk, right? When you look at those numbers, you wonder if there might be something that can be exploited. I don't think that's going to keep him from being a star, but it's something to keep an eye on. What I have written in my risk notes is that he's a mid-risk. He has some in-zone swing and miss, which I don't think is always too concerning, right? You only have to hit the ball once, but it's something to keep an eye on. And then the risk of platoon splits, and then his big change in approach was just last year. So we've seen people make changes, then revert back to what they did previously. So that's also something to keep an eye on. Those things are why I don't have him as my number one prospect overall, but it is something to keep an eye on. That said, I think he's a tremendous value. I think props to anybody who got him on the cheap last year or happened to have him on their roster. Luckily, I think he is going to be a star. I would put the possibility of him being a superstar at less than 50%, but certainly a star fantasy player at third. One last thing, when you look at, and this is an exercise I've been doing lately, is when you look at the current third base rankings, and you compare these players on this list to Gunnar Henderson, right? Where do you think at his peak, is there a player, not that you can comp, but where does he sit in those rankings at his peak if he reached his peak right now?
So you're talking overall MLB dynasty.
Yeah, so I have, well, not even dynasty, just kind of year to year, right? So I have him in redraft. I have him at 7, right? Right after Arenado and Bregman. But I think at his peak, when Gunnar Henderson is 26 years old, if his age 26 season was right now, do you put him like level with Jose Ramirez? Do you put him level with Bobby Witt Jr. if you have Bobby Witt Jr. as a third baseman? Is he above Machado? Is he below Machado? Where does he slot in for you?
He's in that Machado range. He'll be able to offer the steals, and he's the high floor player too, right? I think that's why he and Carroll are in that same tier of prospects this year. That it's, knock on wood, it's hard to go wrong with him. Yeah, so I think those, being able to put him in the top 7, top 5 of those third basemen because of that high floor is a very logical, reasonable assessment. And he can take off, right?
Right.
As far as, his athleticism goes, his steals, what he could offer different than other third basemen. That lineup is going to evolve and be strong. So, and he could be one of the faces of that franchise.
I have, dynasty wise, I have him at 5, just below Austin Riley. So the typical top 3, and then Austin Riley. I had thoughts of putting Gunnar above Riley. but I tend to underrate Riley. He did have 38 home runs last year. I don't know that Gunner's going to reach that sort of number. But I love him as a prospect. He's really grown on me a ton. Again, there's just this little hint of what was the change last year, and is the change permanent, or is it something that is temporary? There's just the slightest bit of that in my mind, but that's not going to keep me from rostering him if I can.
And I think the question you ask on the other pod is very valid here as well, in the context of what you just asked about where they fit within overall ranking. So is this a player you would want on a championship fantasy baseball team?
Right.
And I think out of all the lists, this is the one would say, with it, there's some with ceiling here, but this is the one you definitely would say yes right now.
Absolutely. I think he's a cornerstone that you can build on in a dynasty league 100%. When you're getting 5 category production at a position that's as shallow as third base is, I think that's a 100%. It's a place to start. All right, number 2. Who's your number or your second third baseman on this list?
This one, you were talking about players that from when we first started this with our first pod that have evolved and that I think better of. So I have Brett Beatty at 2. It's interesting to compare him across the board with Gunnar. He's not the athlete Gunnar is, but Gunnar 6'2", Beatty 6'3", Gunnar 210, Beatty 210. Contact rate, Gunnar 69, Beatty 71. Walk rate, Gunnar 12, Beatty 12. Hard hit 35, 36. Slug 531, 533. And then EV 92 and 92. I upped him 2 because I do put proximity a little bit into this formula. I'm not sure how much he's going to stay at third, but after the Correa incident, I think they really haven't reached out beyond Correa, shows that they're pretty confident in him as well. So I just see him as having that having some floor and having that ceiling of being a solid 4 category contributor. Not with the not going to be that 5 like Gunnar. So Gunnar is in his own tier, and then these others, maybe there's about 4 others coming up. One that maybe I suspect you have at 2 that are in the next tier here.
So you are certainly the high man on Beatty. I have him at 6. It's interesting because he's got to me a classic kind of level left-handed swing, upright stance. He looks a lot taller and skinnier than Gunnar does, even though he's 1 inch taller. Gunnar looks more like an explosive athlete to me, whereas Beatty, he kind of lacks explosion and quick twitch, right? And his swing is so flat. So he hit a ton of ground balls until last year. Last year is a 43.5% ground ball rate, but up until that point, he really wasn't capitalizing on the high exit velocities. And what I have in my notes is that his stats and his exit velocities conflict with what I saw with my eyes, right? I saw a swing that, again, was very level, at times looked like he was swinging down at the ball, which we know can create backspin, right? That's how they used to teach hitting home runs. But I didn't see a star watching him. I didn't see, and I know that the power is there based on the velo numbers, but I don't know that he's gonna actualize that power in game, right? Again, I have him at 6. I think that,
and that's been the criticism of the Mets, right? They have these very talented players coming up that hit the crap out of the ball, but are they taking advantage of that by teaching them swing, right?
So one thing I do incorporate into my ranks is certainly proximity and opportunity, and you'll hear me talk about that later. I think he'll have the opportunity to play a full year at third, and unless he completely bottoms out and the Mets are in contention, I think they're going to leave him there and let him play. Maybe it's scar tissue from players like Cabrian Hayes, but when you have high exit velocities, players that you know are hitting the ball really hard, and you continue to see those really high ground ball percentages, it's I have to stop just hoping that someone gets one thing right with their swing, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that we do all the time. We wish cast upon a player for them to do something that they're not yet doing. And I think that's a little bit.
And even if they adjust launch, there's no guarantee there either, right? So
Right.
Baum is the latest example, right? He went up to 10%, 10 launch, and up from 6 the year before, hit the ball just as hard, but he still only had 13 home runs last year.
Right. It
So,
doesn't guarantee it, right?
yeah.
The other part of ranking him here for me is that there is the distinct possibility that his lack of range and his athletic stiffness moves him to a corner outfield spot. And so at that point in time, you've invested in this player dynasty wise, as your future third baseman. And now he's a corner outfielder who's putting up, pretty much average stats for a corner outfielder with no speed to speak of. So I think there's risk in him moving off of third. I think there's risk in him hitting the ball into the ground too much. If you watch his swing, he's got a very, very level swing. I like that in a player in general. But if you're expecting big power from him based on his velocity numbers, I don't think it's necessarily you were going to see it 100%, right? So I see potential. So his hit tool, he's got 55 hit for me, 60 power, 40 speed, 65 discipline. I have his potential, and I think this is kind of like top end potential as 280, 380, 475 with 25 homers and 5 steals. I know he's got the strength in his bat to hit more than 25 home runs, but I think that his swing path is going to keep him a little bit lower than what he could actually reach.
And one last thing to say about the Mets, they have moved in right field. They said it's for the fan experience, but that's bullshit. If you look at the spray charts of all their players, that even their righties are oppo, can have that oppo power. So so that's going to help him a little bit there.
So I have at 2, as you guessed, Noelvi Marte.
Oh wow, okay.
Did you think there's somebody else?
I was going to guess Collier because I have Collier at 3.
I have Collier at, spoiler, I have him at 5, and we can talk about why. I have Marte at 2. So Noelvi Marte, 21 years old, was signed as a July 2nd signee by the Mariners in 2018 for $1.55 million out of Venezuela. He is listed at 6'1", 181. He is probably closer to 6'3", 210, even closer to 220. Big dude. He was traded from the Mariners to the Reds with Edwin Arroyo, Andrew Moore, and Levi Stout for Luis Castillo in July of 22. Last year in high A, he hit 279, 371, 829 in 520 plate appearances, 74 runs, 19 homers, 58 RBIs, and 23 steals. Okay, got that out of the way. Reds prospect, was a shortstop, too big to be shortstop. Thought he might move to second. He's actually, I think, moving to third. We've talked about him a ton already. I've mentioned that I think there was some boredom or disappointment with still being in high A when I saw him when Everett came to Tri-Cities, and I saw him last season. He actually mentioned that. I watched an interview of him, and he mentioned the fact that when that he was a little bit, that he missed his friends, right? He was a little bit disappointed in not being with them and seeing them graduate. Not necessarily what you want to hear, but I think is part of why I saw some disinterest in him at times in watching him play. But man, you watch him, he looks like, for me, I see Manny Machado, right? I see the same kind of upright, open stance. He tends to step in the bucket at times. He's super pull happy. He's clearly trying to get out in front of the fastball and hit it to left field. But the contact is loud. Even on video, it sounds different off of Noelvi Marte's bat. He's got really good, he's a very selective hitter. He's got a good eye. He's got really good bat to ball, and he can spit on breaking stuff, right? He's not chasing a slider the way you see some younger players chase. I still think he's a great hitter. I think he's going to be an elite hitter in the major leagues. If Cincinnati keeps its dimensions the same with that kind of power, you know, when he was last year and the year before, they talked about him as double plus power potentially. That's how much thunder he has in his bat. And so you bring that bat up to Cincinnati with the dimensions in that field, not to mention the fact that he's not just a non-zero as far as speed, but he actually stole 23 bags last year at 210 plus pounds. So if you assume that as he gets older, he slows down a bit, I'm still thinking 10 to 15 steals, at least in his prime. So if you've got a hitter with that kind of power, right, that's going to give you steals, doesn't strike out a ton. Again, that sounds like Machado to me. Machado is one who would give you some steals at times, you know, plus hitter, plus power. I'm excited. He still remains one of my absolute favorite prospects in the game, even though he's not a Mariner anymore. I have his hit tool at 55, power 65, speed 55, discipline 60, and the potential for a 280, 360, 525 season with 35 homers and 15 steals. Where do you have Marte?
This is going to be the part of the debate. Let me preface this with I see him as let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 high ceiling players on a list of 10 in that high ceiling, along with Henderson, and I'll mention the others as well. I have him at 8.
Okay.
Now there is he's with another player down at the bottom, Brady House, and I'm dependent upon scouts here, right? As far as, you know, are they going to grow into what everybody said? So I don't want to discount him, and I think some are already kind of discounting him, right? I would say he, out of all the players on this list, he is the buy low, except in our league because we have somebody that likes to hold on to these players, right? But he's a great buy low right now. I just want him to show me the money. So you know what is going on here. So he's close to what, he's 48% pull. 48% ground ball with a heavy pull. So that's an indicator that he's probably coming over the ball, right? Pulling too hard. And everybody's talked about his oppo power, right? And he's 15% oppo. And so to me, that's not an indication of you know, that he's failing. It's an indication that maybe, you know, Cincinnati has some work to do, or he has some work to do as far as adjustments, right? Everybody talks about his EV. It's hard to measure in the minors. BA had him at 85 average EV. I would like to see more EV stats, like, you know, where's it coming off on when he really does connect, right? What's his highest EV? Because I think we've all witnessed the loud at bats here. So and 458 slug, I would like to see that show me the money over 5 this year. So I'll be watching closely. I will buy low if I can. But he's one of those where trust the scouts, trust our eyes, but I'd like to see the numbers follow that.
I think he's a prime example for me of prospect fatigue and people gravitating to the next shiny thing, right? Because he's just turned 21 and he's been a prospect on our minds for a long, long time, right? He's someone that we've paid attention to, someone we talked about. Does he have double plus power? Is his hit tool going to be average to slightly above average? Is it going to be below? Like, we talked about him a ton, round and round in circles.
Yeah.
And
we were talking about him. I was pre-COVID, right?
Yep.
So it goes.
Well, in 19, he was in the Dominican League, Summer League. He played really well, right? And he's also, his body has changed, right? He's gone from this kind of 5-tool strong but slender shortstop to kind of a rocked up third baseman at this point in time, right? So I just think people want to chase the next great thing. And you forget that the pedigree is there. You forget that what the ball sounds like off of his bat. He's also been traded once, right? Which is something I talked a lot about, the fact that I think he saw players that he came up with pass him by. And that was, you saw a lack of interest, I think, because of that. So position change, organization change, body type change, that doesn't take away from the fact that it's still plus to double plus power with great bat to ball. I don't know.
There needs to be humility here, right? As far as the way we evaluate players. So
Totally.
it goes back to the point about Gunnar. Gunnar may not have been on a top 10, or he probably would have been in my place where Marte is, right? So we need to be open to say these players are going to jump, and some of them may. And what are the indicators? And here I don't think the numbers are the indicator, but the pedigree is, right. What we've always seen in the age too, right? The age versus the competition.
Right. I trust what I saw in him the year before last year, what I see in his swing. I hope that he doesn't get bigger. I think that he could stand to even limber up maybe a tiny bit. His swing looked a little bit stiff in AFL. And I love he's got a really pretty swing, right? But there's a slight stiffness to it that, like Marco Luciano, who I think has a very similar swing, is a much more smooth and a much more limber. And I think Marte would benefit from that a little bit. But again, you've got a great eye, or a good eye. You've got good bat to ball. You've got someone who has an explosive swing, who is above average runner, and potentially double plus power playing third base. That's what I believe he is. And I see, again, I think we get caught up in the next great dude and forget about what we saw in previous years. He's still one of my favorites, and I'll continue to make trade offers to try to get him. In fact, I just made one yesterday.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did. After watching.
You don't have him in any of our 3 leagues, huh?
No, I have him in one.
Okay. Oh, you drafted
an offer for him in the other 2.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
But it's funny, you go and watch and you're reminded of why you love that player so much, right? So Marte is my 2. Let's take a quick break and we'll come back with like 3 through 6 or so.
Okay.
All right, Matt, number 3.
Number 3, I got Cam Collier, the Cincinnati Reds. They're what's he, 19 now? 18?
18
years old.
Just turned 18.
18-year-old, hitting at 91 average EV. Great eye, great hit tool. Already 76% contact rate, 20% walk rate. That's limited as far as what we have with that data. I'm not sure how long he's going to stay at third. If Marte comes up, is he going to move to first? Where is he going to go? But as far as talking about a young player coming up and just having that hit talent with power in Cincinnati is quite encouraging. And so for me, he's the young player on this board to invest in highly. And I would reach up in FYPDs to get him above some of the other players that are going, especially in dynasty, Yosh, Senga, forget about them. Get Collier right after Termar and Holiday, I think.
I've professed my love for Cam Collier for quite a while. I have him at 5. So it's interesting because there's really wide-ranging opinions about Cam Collier currently. A part of it is, I think, just because he's 18. And he's a kind of a numerical, what do they call it? Like a statistical or numerical darling, like because he you know, when because his age is so young, and he really dominated in community college ball as a 17-year-old. He's breaking the models, right? And
Yeah.
so nobody really knows what to do with him. I've seen him, you know, he was rated pretty low by Baseball Prospectus. You know, they had a lot of questions about his power and whether he'll realize his power. And I think they had him 4th in the Reds top 10, which makes some sense, but pretty low on their top 100. Whereas Keith Law had him as the number 2 prospect coming out in the draft last year, and has him, I believe, at 17 in the Athletic. So you see these wide-ranging ranks. I watched probably about 10 minutes of film on Cam Collier last night, and I love him. It didn't change. I felt like I needed to dig deeper because of the wide-ranging opinions from others. But he's the only third baseman on this list for me that has a 65 hit, 65 power. He hasn't really realized that power yet, but just go watch his swing, right? He's balanced. He's really squatty in terms of his stance. It looks like he's almost doing a wall sit when he's up at, and it's funny because he reminded me of my daughter, who's a softball player, and she's 5'2", and she looks like she's doing a wall sit left-handed. Very light stride, barely has to stride at all, but he's strong. His bat speed is for real. And he's got a really quick swing as well. The one thing that he does that I don't like is that he tends to drift forward and he gets a little bit out of balance. And that's part of why I think people don't love his power yet. But he's got great bat to ball skill. And I think the power will come as he's a bit more balanced at the plate. The other thing is right now he's got more of a center to left center approach. And I do think that as he learns to pull the ball more, you'll start to see more power from him. But again, go watch him play. I think that, you know, we can talk till we're blue in the face about our different evaluations of these players. And I think a lot of it is based on numbers and obviously other people's opinions. You take those into account. But for me, it really does kind of solidify what I think of a player when I watch all the film that I possibly can on him. And Collier was one of those. You can't watch Cam Collier and not believe that the hand-eye coordination is elite, the hit tool is elite, and then you look at his strength, his body, and his swing, and not believe that the power is going to develop. The only way the power doesn't develop from Collier is if there's some sort of hitch, right, in his swing that's not correctable, and that's not what I saw. So I have in my risk, he's still high risk because he's 18. There are questions about his power, like I said, from other evaluators, but his strength, his bat speed, his build, his hand-eye coordination all scream developing power to me. He also has a great arm, and so he was pitching in the low 90s as a high schooler. So
you mean he could go to right field?
I think he could. My guess is he stays at third and they figure out something else to do with Marte. I think Marte is more likely to play left field than Collier is to play right field. The other thing with Collier is I think that right now is going to be the lowest value to try to acquire him. I don't think it's going to go anywhere but up. I love him.
More exciting ones to see in minors this year.
I have him at 5. A lot of it is just age. I think he probably has the third most upside to me on this list, but I have him at 5 just because, again, he's further away than those above him. But love him.
Yeah, I don't see like Watson last year had all right, because he's this young guy that hits the shit out of the ball. But the concerns were with eye and swing and miss. Now we have a player that doesn't have Watson's speed, but you have this high floor with somebody that hits the shit out of the ball that has a great eye and great contact. So yeah, I see him as an immediate buy. And he's somebody that you can, out of all kind of these high ceiling players besides Gunnar, I think he's the one that you could build a franchise around.
Agreed.
Or build a dynasty team around.
Agreed. The one knock is the speed. If you assume the power is coming, but I think the hit and the power are so great that you find the speed elsewhere on your team. I'm so excited to watch him play this year. Him and Termar I'm ready to watch for sure. All right. Who do you have at 4?
I have Josh Young at 4.
Mm-hmm.
He's the proximity guy, going to get a chance in Texas. I am giving him a break because he was out with his shoulder last year. Some of the concerns why he's falling, he fell quite a bit, I think, on BP, didn't he? Almost to the end of the list.
Mm-hmm.
He's still pretty high on Baseball America in the 30s or so, but he kind of crept in the off season in the 20s on most lists, and now he's kind of between 30 and 50. A lot of that downgrading had to do with the swing and the miss when he came up to the majors, and even in the minors last year at the end. But I think I watched some of I think he was pressing. He wanted to say, because his big breakout was a year before, he wanted to show that his power was for real, because he came up as kind of a hit line drive guy. And I think he was pressing and he wasn't timing. His timing was off. You know, he was out most of the year, and he was just put in a pressure situation going from AAA to the majors. So if we look at his minor league stats overall, he's at 76 contact rate, you know, and that includes the low minors, but still it wasn't, you know, his swing and the miss was a concern, but not as large a concern as it's become.
Mm-hmm.
His walk rate, his eye is lower than I would like. That's why he's not, you know, he's never been over 10% with his walk rate. His EVs have always been talked about. He's at 90 average exit velocity. His best year in minors, he was close to a 600 slug in 21. And then you do have the context of Texas as well, that he's going to be protected, or, you know, he's going to be protected by a lot of other hitters that are probably going to get on base if they're going to challenge Young. So he will help with accounting stats that way.
What do you see his upside as? So if Josh Young is, you know, kind of gets to the 80th or 90th percentile of his talent, what does that year look like for you? Triple slash, homers, steals?
As far as, I'll get to that in a second. As far as ranks, I don't see him going into the top 5 necessarily. For sure, I could see him. I could see consistency there being between 6 and 10. You know, in his high seasons. So 260, 25 home runs, 85 RBIs type of third baseman.
Sure.
Pretty dependable. Maybe not one you would want to build your franchise around, but one that is not going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm. That's funny, because I literally have the same stats as you just predicted. I said 260, 340, 475 with 22 homers is kind of that upside potential. But I have him all the way at 10. Part of that,
it's going to be interesting to see what Texas does in developing him, because he came up initially kind of like his brother as a hit tool third baseman, and then he developed his power in 21. So are they going to have, after his struggles last year, are they going to try to develop that hit more? Are they going to go all in power? How are the rule changes going to affect him? So a lot of questions there as far as where he goes with that. So I think
he had a torn
21 season, had him, you know, high 20s, low 30s with home runs. But I think after last year and just after seeing him, that's a bit too high.
I have him, or he had a torn labrum that in the offseason, I believe, between 21 and 22, which is when he was recovering from that, which is why he missed the first 4 months of the season. It's hard to know, right? You come back from an injury like that, like, is he nervous that he's going to hurt it again? Is he trying to feel out his swing? I'll grant him that the injuries could have impacted him. He had horrendous walk to K rates in both AAA and in the majors last year. But previously he was, you know, he had lower K rates. He had higher walk rates. So I have him, his hit and power is 55, speed 45, discipline 55. I don't see it. I see some risk, but not a ton. There's when you're going to be the starting third baseman in the major leagues this year, you can't really list him as high risk anymore. The risk of him flaming out and not having an opportunity is now gone, right? But I do think that I see him more as like a slightly below average offensive third baseman. He also doesn't have a ton of upside potential because he is 25, right? Who he is probably going to be who he is. This year or next year are probably going to be his physical peaks. And so unless he can improve some of the mental part of the game and get better statistically because of it, these next couple of years are probably going to be his best years. So he's got to capitalize on that. He's a meh player. I put that he's a meh player for me, and that he's serviceable, but I would rather have the upside of some of the others above him on my list. I just don't love the profile. I think I'm pretty low on both he and his brother. They seem like the type of players for me that you have to trade hit for power, and then they've got to make a choice whether it's hit or power as opposed to both. We'll see. It's for me, he's a prototypical, right-handed third baseman who's going to be okay, but isn't going to win a championship for you. He's like the anti-Cam Collier in a lot of ways.
All right. Have 3 and 4?
So I rated Vargas as a third baseman. I know he's starting at second. I think his ultimate home with the Dodgers is as a third baseman. We talked about Vargas on the second base pod, so I won't go too deep into him. I have him at 3, 23 years old, basically destroyed the minor leagues the last couple of years. We talked a little bit about his speed being surprising. He was 94th percentile sprint speed last year in the majors. Professional hitter, balanced approach. He's definitely hit over power, but the power may come. Fun player. I'm excited to watch him play. I see him in a Dodger uniform for the next 10 years. Tremendous value to a major league franchise. I just don't know that he has the upside that Marte and Henderson do from a power perspective. I think he may be a better overall hitter than those two, but he doesn't quite have the power. He's not, even though he runs fast, he's not a quick twitch player. He doesn't have the explosiveness that those two do for me. But I still love him. And I think those 3 players are grouped closer than one might think. I don't have the same separation between Gunnar and the rest that I think some others do. And then at 4, I have Marco Luciano. Currently considered a shortstop prospect for the Giants. I think he moves to third. 21 years old, listed 6'2", 175. He's probably closer to 6'2", 205. Signed July 2nd, 2018 for $2.6 million by the Giants. Was injured for the first half of 2022. He's a definite power over hit prospect. His swing, and I have in my notes that his swing and stiffness remind me of Marte a bit, and that Marte is a better hitter with the potential for more speed and more power, but that Luciano is still a very, very powerful hitter and a good hitter. Like I said, he's a third baseman in my opinion. Balanced stance and swing, high waist, takes a walk, tremendous bat speed, and it's pretty clear he's trying to launch the ball. For his tools, 55 hit, 65 power, 45 speed, 55 discipline. I don't think he's the top 10 prospect that we thought he might be heading into 22, but he's a player that could hit 35 home runs for the Giants. I don't think that would surprise really any of us at this point. Where do you have Luciano?
Yeah, so the 2 players you just mentioned aren't far off. So I have Vargas at 5. I had Vargas higher as second base, so I'm including him in both. Luciano at 6. I think I've said plenty on Vargas. What concerns me at Vargas at third compared to second is I like power at the corners, and I still have a lot of concern about his power if he'll ever get over 20 home runs. So he'll provide that consistency, but I don't see Vargas potentially being that player that is going to be the star third baseman that's going to win a fantasy baseball championship. He's
Does
not going to hurt you, but I could see him at second doing that.
sure. Does Vargas's potential speed mitigate the lack of power at all for you from a roster construction perspective?
I have note here he's on my watch list for his speed this year. So that could potentially up him, and then rule change could up him as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't, how aggressive are the Dodgers going to be? I think that's just a wait and see with all the teams. But he was aggressive last year when he came up, right? And they basically set him free with that triple and that steal in that first game he played. He didn't get very many opportunities past that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that can up it, and he's waiting to see for me, but as a safe high floor player, kind of like I can see him as a Gunnar light, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's one of the 2 third basemen on my top 10 that I have as low risk. Vargas is, and then Luciano. You said you have.
I love Luciano. I don't think he's one that maybe hasn't performed as poorly with numbers as Marte, but he really hasn't had a full season to see that, right? Last year when he did start off, he started out hot, and he was very it was assuring too, because he lowered his K rate. So the year before in 21, his K rate was a huge concern. He's 74% contact, which is decent. His walk rate 10%. It is interesting. Everybody talks about his loud bat. And we see it on the high end exit velocities, but Baseball America had him at 87 average, right? Average EV. Yeah, he's to me, what is a determining factor there is not wanting to give up on him is just watching him play. He's an athlete, right? I could see why scouts, when he came up, were so high on him. And I think he kind of has those same characteristics as Marte, like, holy shit, why hasn't this guy performed yet, right? When you see him play. There are concerns for me, and I think this is starting to come up more about San Francisco's ability to develop pitchers versus hit. Some talented guys can come up like Ramos, Hunter Bishop, that really haven't developed well at all. So So I would like to see that tested out. They're going to be aggressive with him this year. I think he's starting in Double-A, and they were straightforward about him playing third at Double-A. So he's one that will be fun to watch and see what happens.
I would argue that at least with Marte, not to go back to him, that he has, for his age, that he has put up the numbers, right? 17 home runs in 21. 19 home runs in 22. His slug wasn't over 5, but he had a 366 and 371 OBP, slug in the mid 400s with 24 and 23 steals. You're talking about not just double-digit homers and steals, but like high teens home runs, mid 20 steals, high OBP, decent average, right? With room to grow as a player who's young for the league. And so I think that I think when we talk about players putting up numbers, or, as you said, kind of showing them the money or presenting the evidence of those skills, I would argue that Marte actually has, and we just had kind of unreal expectations of him. Given
they're not high sexy.
They are to me. If you're putting up double-digit homers and steals as a 19 and a 20-year-old, to me, that's impressive, right? Especially at the time, playing a middle infield spot. So I just think tempering or putting the expectations in some form of perspective from a statistical standpoint is super important. I also know that the Mariners they're more about developing. I think all the teams are, but they want to develop the skill. They want to develop the swing. They want to develop the ability to not chase a right-hander, to not chase a slider out of a right-hander's hand. They're developing skill sets as opposed to trying to put up numbers immediately. And I think
What do
Marte.
you see about those? How would you defend the underlying metrics behind that, right? Where he has been criticized for the low EVs. He has been criticized for the ground ball rate, for being pull heavy when he does have opposite field power. Do you see those as metrics that can be adjusted?
Yeah, I think that so part of it is, his approach currently is way too pull happy. And so we all know he can hit the shit out of a fastball, but he will top tons of breaking balls right now, right? Instead of taking the breaking ball to right field or right center, he's trying to pull it. And so he's topping it to the left side of the infield. That's going to kill your EVs, right? So I would be more interested in understanding like where each EV landed, right? My guess is to get that average, he probably do you have his max, or do you know his max?
No, the fuckers don't publish that shit.
So my guess is, in watching him, my guess is that his max is probably pretty high, and but that he has a whole bunch of balls that he's topped where he's got this really low EV. So average EV for me doesn't always tell the whole story, right? He's also a player that I think is either hitting the ball on the ground or he's hitting it out. And so those are all things that I think can be taught. I think he's been taught to try to yank the ball to left field, and but he has the skill set to be more diverse over time. I'm gambling that he will become more diverse over time. But again, I'm interested in the EV numbers. I think they do tell it. They are a part of the narrative. But when I watch the ball come off his bat in watching video, I see the same explosiveness that I see in Luciano. And I think they're similar players. Marte is faster and a better hitter, but I think they are some similar players, those two. All right, so we got through year 6, is that right? So you went Gunnar,
Beatty, Collier, Young, Vargas, Luciano.
Got it. And my top 6 were Gunnar, Marte, Vargas, Luciano, Collier, Beatty. So that takes us to 7. Who do you have at 7?
I have Junior Caminero at 7.
Nice.
I'm not sure as far as how we can assess. It's hard with international prospects and getting info on them as far as where they are now, right? He's initially listed at 5'11" for 157.
We know that's not the case.
Yeah. So if you watch him, that's definitely not the case, right? What's impressive about him is they've always talked his power, plus power. And then he comes up and performs, and he's at 82% contact rate. So for me, that's really telling as far as having that power and that contact rate. His swing and strike rate is kind of weird. His contact rate's high. His swing and strike rate is pretty high as well. His walk rate's at 8%, but that could develop with him. I just like if you talk kind of about a twitchy, athletic, power hitter that I think could also hit for average. And in a great system of Tampa, he's that type of player. And this is another player that Tampa nabbed from somebody else, Cleveland, quite early in 2019, when he was pretty young. I think he's 18 now, 19 now. Yeah, so I love the upside here. I love the high floor as well. He's another player I'd like to see in the minors this year. He did go to in winter ball, go to Australia with Willie Vasquez, the other another up and coming Tampa guy. And he did improve his walk rate. It is Australia, but it is interesting since need that Tampa's sending players down there.
I don't have him in my top 10. I agree with with your assessment of him. I'm so cool right now on Tampa hitting prospects. I just don't know who's going to play and who's not, right? And I also don't know where they're going to play. And that makes me nervous. Even if I like the skills, I worry that they have a real opportunity, and their willingness to manipulate some of that for all the different reasons that they do, whether it's arbitration, the flexibility. It's flexibility is good from a positional standpoint with regards to fantasy, right? But even if he's a good player, I say this over and over again, is he going to get 300 at bats or 600 at bats? You don't know. Vidal Brujan was a top 25 prospect for a while, and he's really can't find the field for Tampa. So with the other prospects on this list, I would say that I like him maybe more than a couple on my top 10 from just a skills perspective, and the fact that he has greater upside than the guys on my list. But because he's in Tampa and he's so young, I couldn't put him on.
And then the other thing to say about that is it's not just playing time for your fantasy baseball team when it comes to the Tampa critique. And I think we can say the same things about the Dodgers. If you just let fruit just sit, it's going to rot, right? Yeah. And it just seems like there's other teams that are really conscientious of this, that once they're up, they're going to play every day, want to develop them. And bringing up these talented guys as just platooners is I just question that strategy. And maybe Tampa will have they're into changing, they're into evolving. Maybe as these talented players come up, maybe they'll change. But that is a very reasonable concern.
One can only hope, right?
Yeah.
Well, versus like in Atlanta, right? Who Grissom and plays Harris and reaps the rewards of that. I just think it's that approach, organizational approach, is important. If skill sets are similar, who are you going to take, right? Who's the player you want? My next player, my number 7, is on the opposite end of that spectrum. It is Brooks Lee, the first round pick of the Minnesota Twins last year. He is currently a shortstop. I believe he lands at third. Just watch him play, watch his swing, look at his body type. He does not look like a shortstop to me, or someone that can stick it short to me. He's a little thicker, or a little too thick to do that without the quick twitch. 21 years old, 6'2", 205. Played college ball at Cal Poly for his dad, Larry. Drafted in 8th overall by the Twins. Last year, he made it all the way to Double-A. So rookie ball, high A and Double-A. He hit 303, 388, 839 in 139 plate appearances. So they were pretty aggressive with him. They wanted to see what they had. Switch hitter. He's got uncanny bat to ball skill. I think he can be a Gold Glover at third base. It doesn't matter for fantasy, but I do think he's, just watching him play, he is a very good fielder. He just doesn't have the athletic talent, I think, that some of the others do. Super unorthodox swing. So here's the big thing. You'll hear people talk about Brooks Lee in a much shinier light than I am. And they'll say, his swing is unorthodox, but he's a ball player. He's good. He's smart. He's all those things. It's such a flat swing. It's like, it's a super, super level swing, right? So you've got to wonder, does that power come? It was interesting. There's actually a clip online of him talking with Harold Reynolds and his dad, and it's about his swing. And he talks about how Hank Aaron had a level swing, and Hank Aaron hit 700 and whatever home runs. And I wanted to scream at the TV, dude, you're not Hank Aaron, right? Like, your flat swing is not going to lead to power. So with that level of hand-eye coordination, but with that kind of level swing, I think he's going to be a high average, high OBP guy, but he's got very little power and no speed to speak of. So when I look at a player like that, and I think about, fantasy baseball to me is power and speed, right? Power and speed, and then context. And if you can get to your power and you're fast, you're going to be a well-rounded player. And if you play on a good team, you're going to have a lot of runs and a lot of RBIs, right? Super simplistic idea, but that's kind of what I walk into it with. Because if you don't have power and you don't have speed, now you're lacking 2 of the 5 offensive categories.
And especially at a corner.
It's a simple way to look at it. It's oversimplifying, but I think it tells a really good story. I think it's really, if you start through that lens, it tends to weed out a lot of the noise. And Brooks Lee is, I think, going to be a very good real life player, provide a ton of value to the Minnesota Twins, but fantasy wise is the kind of player I try to avoid. I think if I rostered him as my third baseman, I would consistently be looking to upgrade at that position. I have him at 7 because I think his floor is very high. I think there's very low risk in him not reaching, kind of a high average, 280 to 300 average, high OBP sort of player. But it's kind of like what you want, Mark Grace at third base, right? That's kind of who he is.
I was looking for comps for him. Mm-hmm. He's not in my top 10, but he's just on the threshold here. But listen to these numbers: 16 home runs, 60 RBIs, 275, 60 walks, 84 Ks, 782 OPS. Mm-hmm. That is Joel Youngblood for the New York Mets in 1979, right? Sure. But that's the type of player he is, right? He's this consistent. Is he ever going to hit a ceiling that's going to help you? And I think these consistent defensive OPS non-power third basemen are going to hurt you in fantasy. So it's not even like a Young for me. It's somebody that may potentially especially in a head-to-head hurt you in a lot of weeks.
Mm-hmm. I would take the consistency of Brooks Lee over Josh Young. I think that there's less risk. And at this point in my rankings, that's worth something to me. Again, one of the reasons why he's not a shortstop anymore to me is they signed Carlos Correa for 6 years. Mm-hmm. So if Correa was signed for 6 years and they expect that he can stay at short, Brooks Lee's going to have to find a different position. It might be second, but they also have Edouard Julien, who we talked about before. Can you pronounce him for me again?
Julien.
So I don't know. I see Brooks Lee as a third baseman. Boring player, not the kind of player I want to necessarily roster or build my team around, but low risk and will provide hits, average, potentially some runs and RBIs, and is a below average power, but is not a zero power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a good comparison to somebody who's probably not going to in that short, and you don't know if he's going to go to second, would be I'm sorry, I went blank. Our San Diego pal.
Oh, Jackson Merrill.
Yeah, Jackson Merrill. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Merrill hits the shit out of the ball. He's always been seen as kind of coming up as that type of high floor player. Mm-hmm. But he's made progress in doing that, and he's always been athletic and has had that hard hit compact swing, and he does ground out a lot, but that's something that can be fixed, right? So what I'm trying to say is I'm not confident Lee that extra oomph that will get him to that high level, whereas Jackson Merrill certainly has those things that can be fixed.
Mm-hmm. It's also athleticism and explosion, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's no coincidence that the top of the list has explosive players, right? High upside, elite explosion. And you say to yourself, if you can correct or learn how to do these things better, that athleticism will shine. Mm-hmm. You get to this part of the list and you're looking at Brooks Lee and you're just saying, you know what, great, you got a high floor, but there's no explosiveness that you can dream on. There's no the athletic talent isn't necessarily there in the same way it is for some others. So again, he's at 7 for me in large part because I think it's low risk and he'll continuously be one of those borderline starter sort of fantasy third baseman, I think, for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And in our league, he'll continuously be redrafted in the first 4 rounds or so. Why don't we take a quick break? We'll come back with our bottom, the bottom third of our top 10 list and anything else you want to discuss on these third basemen.
Great. I'm gonna go.
All right, man. Number 8.
Number 8, that's where I have Marte.
Talk about him again.
We'll aim for every pod with him.
That's right. All right. So at 8, I have Colson Montgomery.
Okay.
Currently shortstop prospect. I believe he moves to third base. Chicago White Sox, 21 years old, 6'4", 205, drafted number 22 overall by the White Sox in 21. Played A-ball, high A, and double A last year. 274, 381, 810 with in 421 plate appearances, 58 runs, 11 homers, 47 RBIs, and 1 steal. The comp that I hear often is Corey Seager. And I say to that, just because he's 6'4", left-handed and white doesn't mean that, and a shortstop doesn't mean that he's Corey Seager. I think he has both less power and less hit tool than Seager does. He's had 1 stolen base in 122 minor league games, which is interesting to me because he was an Indiana State high school basketball star and a very, very good athlete, right? But he hasn't stolen any bags in games, and I have his speed as a 45. I think that his height and as he develops a little more, his body is gonna take him from shortstop to third base. So what is there to like about him? I've talked about some of the negative parts. He's got a 60 hit tool and a 55 power that I think there is potential for that to get to 60. I don't think it will. And he's a pretty disciplined hitter as well. He makes good swing decisions. Being that tall, he could very easily reach for a lot of pitches that are outside, and he doesn't. He also hits the ball where it was pitched, at least from what I saw. And I like that, right? I like a guy who's going to take an outside pitch to left field, not going to roll over on it, or to right field, excuse me, to left field, and not roll over on it and hit it to a ground ball to second base. He does step in the bucket a bit, which is funny to me. So one of the things that I saw with him is where he stepped with his front foot was where the ball was, where he was hitting the ball. So it wasn't a consistent stride, right? If he stepped in the bucket, he was trying to pull it. If he stepped forward, he's trying to go oppo or to center. And I don't know necessarily what that means as much as I just found it pretty interesting. To me, his floor is an empty batting average third baseman. Again, kind of like Brooks Lee, who you're always looking to upgrade. I think he has more power projection than Brooks Lee does, but there's also a little bit more risk because of his track record. And I think there's little chance that he stays at short. So what I have in my notes for risk is fantasy-wise, you'll have to find your OPS and your stolen bases elsewhere. So not my favorite prospect. Certainly not Corey Seager. Isn't going to hit for power. Is definitely not going to steal bases, but I think will end up being a pretty good hitter for average and a boring third baseman. Do you have
I have him at 10. Similar things. I do like his eye. I do like his hit. His speed. I think BA had him at 50. So 45, 50. He did put on some muscle, 20 pounds of muscle since he was drafted. So that is going to help his hit. But even his hard hit, his EVs aren't spectacular, right? And that's where the Seager comp just falls apart. So yeah, he's a serviceable third baseman, a floor third baseman that may him. I have him higher than Lee just because I see a little more power, but then there's doubts with his hit, right? So what is Chicago going to do? How do they develop players? I think their pitching development has been a little more impressive, especially when you get to the MLB. But even what they did with a highly talented player like Vaughn, Vaughn hasn't broken out yet. He's just kind of that high floor first baseman now. So can they give a ceiling in developing players?
Right.
And Montgomery is probably an example of a player that doesn't have the pedigree to develop that. but he could at least be turned into a high floor player, in my opinion, especially with the eye and the discipline.
Right. And he's got a nice swing, right? It's a pretty level swing,
Yeah,
but he's
it's
got a nice
compact too.
swing. So it's not, I don't hate him as a prospect. I just think that there's not the ceiling that you're looking for when you're looking at prospects. If he happens to develop, and especially in redraft, if he happens to develop and he has some decent years, that's great. He can be your third baseman. You're looking for some stats elsewhere, as I said. But as far as investing in him now at 21 and in AA, expecting him to be a star for you on your team, I don't think he's that. All right, so he's your 10, right?
I want to talk about my 9 now.
All right, who's your 9?
My 9 is Brady House, Nationals first round pick in 2021, 6'4", 215. He's an example of a player that if you go back to Baseball America, go back to Baseball Prospectus, go back to the respectable list as far as those who are in contact with front offices, that everybody was high on as a riser last year, right? His power was listed at 70. Some people thought his hit, especially when he first came to the Nats, was affected. And then all of a sudden he fell apart last year. I would contend this is the other issue with minors. They're just so holding their cards to their vest, right, and not wanting to show that even with the stats we want, but with injury especially, right, they're not required to really talk too much about it. So I think he was injured most of last year. That affected his numbers. I'm willing to throw out those numbers from last year and just see him with a fresh start this year, because you can't have that type of pedigree and then have like a 380 slug, right? So he's one that I'm going to watch very carefully. He's a great at the end of a draft in a dynasty league. He's a great buy low right now. And a great investment as far as a player that is very affordable right now that could have a very high ceiling still.
And you see him as a third baseman, not a shortstop, correct?
Oh, yeah.
I agree with all that. I think, he did have back trouble last year, which is concerning to me. When it's a back, it's very different. I think Luciano's problem was a back as well, but that was a strain. I don't know if it was a strain with House or not. I assume that's what it was. Yeah, I think he probably still has 65, 70 grade power. He's a wait and see, right? I think he's just a player that, as you said, the pedigree says buy low now, and especially if you're investing very little capital, kind of see what's there. It's a bit of a lottery ticket. At this point in time, you're deciding lottery ticket or low ceiling sort of thing. My 9 is Jordan Westburg. So we're on opposite ends of that spectrum, right? House is this elite potential, could flame out, could have a bad back that forces him to retire sort of thing. Westburg is kind of boring, but a player who is rosterable, I think, even next year. 23 years old, 6'3", 203, low first round pick of the Orioles in 2020. He had 622 plate appearances last season in the minor leagues, which is crazy. So 96 runs, 27 homers, 106 RBIs, and 12 steals. He's not a non-zero, or he's a non-zero speed guy, which I think we've talked about this before, is of value at some of the power positions. He's definitely power over hit at this point, right-handed bat, lots of upper body in his swing, swings and misses some. Looks like to me like he's swinging from his heels, quote unquote. Not that he's using his lower body as much, but he's trying to hit the ball out. Slightly open stance. I like him. I think that I wonder about where he plays on that team. Somebody's got to play a corner outfield spot, probably, whether it's him or Norby or Mayo. They've got a lot of players kind of that ilk, right? But Westberg he's a major leaguer. He's not necessarily skill set wise, but it reminds me of like a Trey Mancini, just right-handed hitter, gonna be a professional, gonna get his 6 years in his pension, right? Is gonna have a couple years where people think he could be better than he actually is. He's just not a star. I think he ends up at third because he's 6'3". There's not a whole lot of 6'3" second baseman at this point in time, right? So I think he does end up.
He's what, 6 feet, 5'11", so he's more of that second baseman profile.
Right. So Westberg, I have him at third. I think third base because I do think they'll keep Gunnar at short for a while until Holiday comes up. That's the likely scenario in my mind. Ortiz isn't a good enough prospect, I think, to start. I think they'd prefer to have Norby at second, Gunnar at short, Westberg at third. I think Mayo will be a first baseman or a corner outfielder. And then when Holiday comes up, they'll reshuffle based on who's performing. But I like Westberg. I think he's a professional hitter. He's going to hit for power. I could see him pop a 25 home run season. He's probably going to hit somewhere between 240 and 265 to do it, but there's value there, right? I know on my fantasy team, I'd certainly take 25 home runs at third base right now. So I don't know. He was actually kind of fun for me to research and learn about more. I enjoyed it. And, when I look at the other third basemen that are just off the list, Colt Keith, Brady House, as you talked about, I think Ronnie Mauricio might be a third baseman, Warming, Burnett Bell, Junior Caminero. Westberg to me is close to the majors, if not a major leaguer next year. And that's kind of what puts him over the top. Did you look at Westberg at all?
Yeah. To me, it's how is Baltimore going to play this out with Mayo, Norby? They have all these players coming up, but I do like what Baltimore, in contrast to Tampa, they bring up players to play them, right? Even Adley's delay was we're not going to bring him up until he's going to catch 120 games and be ready for that. And I like that they give besides injury, right? You had Kjerstad and then the pitchers that have had injuries, but their hitters, it's amazing how much experience they get them, right? Even if you look at at bats, I'm not sure what the reason why is, if they're keeping them healthy or what the reason is, but Norby, Westberg, Mayo, they have like full-on seasons last year, playing every single game, right? So I like they're not letting their apples just sit there, right? They're and I think the same thing is going to happen in the majors, right? They're going to find a position for them and they're going to play them every day. Even if they're shifting positions, they're still going to play a lot.
Yep. I think it's super smart. I also think, that they are, now this is a guess, but I think they're trying to create momentum and excitement and build, for the immediate future. And so, Rutschman comes up last year, creates a buzz. Grayson, I think, would have come up if he was healthy last year. They said they're going to try to, start him in the rotation this year. I think they're trying to bring these young players and really infuse the organization with some excitement. And so I would err on the side of seeing Westberg and Norby and eventually Cowser, coming up sooner rather than later. In fact, I would gamble that Westberg and or Norby start the season in the major leagues. So again, playing time opportunity is a part of this evaluation. And as it was with like Josh Young or Brett Beatty, even if you don't love the skill set, as I don't, the fact that they're going to have a job is worth quite a bit when you're looking at dynasty rankings. So Westberg's at 9. Again, he's kind of I think he's similar to Josh Young in some ways. Young has a little bit more upside because he's demonstrated it in the minors, but I'll take Westberg over Young. I like the skill set a little bit more. You got anything else at third base? What's your overall perspective on this position? And how would you approach it as a dynasty player in general?
Yeah, so to me, it's a lot like second for me. You have one player that stands out, right? That we know for sure in the future is going to be there. You have Gunnar, and then you have Termar at second. Then you have all these players after that are either high floor or high ceiling players or wild cards, right? Lottery tickets. So for me, if I can't get Termar, I'm going to invest in a player that maybe still is in their 20s, high 20s, that is top 5, between top 5 and top 10, and then just kind of wait it out to see if any of these ceiling players come up or any new FYPD players come up. But I would so for me, Luciano is a great lottery ticket. Marte is House, a very cheap one, but higher risk than those two. I wouldn't overpay for a Vargas. I wouldn't overpay for a Young. I think those are great holds. They're not sell highs necessarily. I think Collier is definitely worth an investment in. Beatty is I wouldn't overpay. And it's one of those positions, like if you're building a dynasty team, that it would feel good if you don't have a Gunnar, if you don't have a Termar at second, if you have like another player that's a little older, and then you could wait and gamble on these ceiling players.
I think you get a little bit of everything with the third base prospects, right? But I do think it kind of fell off for me at 7. We have different players in that range, but the top 6 for me, Beatty, Collier, Luciano, Vargas, Marte, Henderson, are all legit, pretty elite prospects, right? Even though I don't like Beatty, consensus is he's an elite prospect. After that, when you talking about Lee, Montgomery, Westberg, for me, Josh Young, any of those guys, it's either, super boring, or like a Caminero is just, or a House, just total lottery tickets. So it's, get one of those top 6 is what I'm saying. If you aren't happy with your current third base situation in Dynasty, and you want to find a young third baseman to invest in, I'd invest in one of those top 6. They're obviously in different places in their developmental curve. But the rest of them, you can let someone else be higher on them, because I just don't think there's the upside with those guys.
Yeah, and I think labeling it as a good, it's out of all the positions we've gone through right now, like catcher is kind of hot and sexy, right? So it's not a buy low area right now, even though there's great prospects. But this is the first that I've come across where there are some really good buy low candidates that if you have security in other and with older players to really buy low on some of these guys.
For sure. Marte, Collier, Luciano, House, even Caminero, getting them now at a reduced rate, I think could provide some pretty nice dividends in the next couple of years. You got anything else at third?
Nope. We're on to shortstop next time, huh?
That's right.
That's another coming back to like a catcher, a loaded position right now.
Absolutely.
I think we'll have some loadeds coming up. So we'll have shortstop, outfield, and SP. So we won't be searching for gems too much in the dirt.
Good stuff. All right, brother.
All right. Take it easy.
Good to see you.